When someone constantly says yes when they actually mean no, it may seem harmless on the surface, polite, agreeable, accommodating, but underneath, it's a slow leak of personal power. That yes becomes a false currency, an emotional transaction based not on truth, but on fear, insecurity, or conditioning. And each time this happens, something inside begins to unravel. You don't feel it all at once. It's subtle, quiet, a gradual erosion of self-respect that hides behind a smile, a nod, a polite agreement. But that erosion creates cracks in the foundation of your identity. You become someone who lives at the mercy of external expectations, not internal alignment. There's a cost to these false yesies. They seem small, agreeing to take on extra work, staying in conversations you want to exit, engaging with people who drain you, saying yes to invitations, commitments, even relationships that you don't want, but the cost is cumulative. It adds up, and what's worse, most people don't realize it's happening until the damage is deep. You wake up one day wondering why you're exhausted, unmotivated, directionless. You start questioning why you feel so disconnected from your goals, your desires, your soul. The reason is simple but brutal. You've been abandoning yourself with every dishonest yes. That repeated compromise trains your subconscious mind to believe that what you want doesn't matter. It convinces your nervous system that safety comes not from honoring your truth, but from avoiding confrontation. And so you betray yourself in micro moments that eventually define the macro structure of your entire life. Think about that, a lifetime of silent compliance, of nodding along when your spirit is screaming no. It becomes second nature. You become a master of pretending to be okay. You justify it. It's easier this way. I don't want to cause conflict. It's just this once. But those justifications are lies we tell ourselves to feel less guilty about our own avoidance. They are the temporary bandages we place over deep wounds of unspoken dissatisfaction, and while the world might reward you for being agreeable, inside, you're slowly disappearing. It's a strange kind of ghosting, not someone else walking away from you, but you abandoning yourself over and over again. And no one sees it. No one mourns it because you're still smiling, still showing up, still saying yes. But inside, a vital part of you is screaming to be heard. The false yes also creates a toxic relationship with your own intuition. Your inner voice becomes muffled. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you dilute the clarity of your instincts. You teach yourself not to trust your gut. You begin to second guess everything. That hesitation infects your decision making. You stall on choices that matter. You procrastinate. You feel foggy. You begin to wonder if you're broken, if you've lost your drive, if maybe you're just not cut out for the life you once dreamed of. But the truth is simpler. You haven't lost your drive. You've just buried it under layers of people, pleasing, and emotional debt. And every buried no becomes a brick in the wall that separates you from your purpose. Let's take it deeper. These false yesies often stem from childhood patterns. If you were raised to be the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who makes everything okay, then your nervous system likely learned that harmony equals survival. Disagreement meant danger, conflict meant chaos, and so you adapted. You learned to smile, to nod, to give in. But the price of that adaptation is identity distortion. You become what others need, not who you are. And unless you interrupt this pattern, you'll carry it into adulthood, into your friendships, relationships, careers, and you'll wonder why everything feels out of alignment. The world reflects your choices, not your potential. And if your choices are rooted in dishonesty, the life you create will never reflect your truth. It will reflect your fear. The tragedy is that many people think they're being kind when they say yes. They believe it's noble to be selfless, accommodating, agreeable, but real kindness isn't about self-erasure. Real kindness includes yourself. Saying yes to others while saying no to yourself is not generosity. It's self-neglect in disguise, and over time, that self-neglect breeds resentment, not just toward others, but toward yourself. You begin to hate the reflection in the mirror, not because you're weak, but because you know you've been lying to yourself. You know you've been playing small. You know you've been choosing comfort over courage, and the mind remembers every time you played small. It stores those moments. It catalogs them as evidence that you can't be trusted to protect your own boundaries. That's how low self-worth is born, not from a lack of ability, but from a repeated pattern of self-abandonment. And it's worse than ghosting because it's internal. You can't block it. You can't delete the thread. You live with it. You carry it. And it shows up in unexpected ways in the job you settle for, in the relationship you tolerate, in the goals you procrastinate, in the dreams you shelf for later. Which usually means never. The weight of 100 dishonest yeses can crush the voice of your potential. Even your body responds to these patterns: fatigue, anxiety, digestive issues, burnout. Your physiology often reflects what your spirit is suppressing. When you say yes out of fear or obligation, your nervous system goes into imbalance. You enter a survival state, a sympathetic overdrive where rest, clarity, and creativity become nearly impossible. That's why people feel tired all the time, not because they are lazy, but because they are misaligned. Their energy is being spent maintaining a false identity, one that says yes to survive instead of no to thrive. And make no mistake, this isn't just a mindset issue. It's a frequency issue. When you say yes to what isn't meant for you, your vibration lowers. You emit the frequency of desperation, not decisiveness. You attract chaos, not clarity, and the universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your energy. So, if you're saying yes but feeling no, the dominant vibration you emit is confusion, conflict, resistance. That vibration brings more of the same, more stress, more frustration, more emotional misalignment. Many people spend their entire lives chasing conditional approval, constantly looking over their shoulder to ensure others are pleased with them, satisfied with them, or at the very least not disappointed. The drive to be accepted becomes stronger than the drive to be authentic. Saying yes becomes a currency they use to buy love, validation, attention, even a sense of safety. But the approval they gain is not unconditional. It's not rooted in who they truly are. It's based entirely on their ability to conform, to comply, to please. That kind of approval is fragile. It can vanish the moment you assert your truth. It can vanish when you say no. So now you're stuck. You keep saying yes just to maintain a connection that was never real to begin with, because it wasn't built on your true self. It was built on your performance. This kind of performance often starts in early life. Maybe you were praised when you did what your parents wanted, or punished when you expressed dissent. Maybe you were only given love when you succeeded, when you achieved, when you smiled and followed the rules. Slowly, your subconscious mind linked yes with love and no with rejection. That association gets wired so deeply into your nervous system that even as an adult, you struggle to say no. Not because you don't want to, but because your body feels unsafe doing so. Your heartbeat quickens, your throat tightens, you overthink, you imagine worst-case scenarios. You start calculating how disappointed someone might be, how angry they might become, how they might withdraw from you. The anxiety is real, but what's even more real is the cost of living like this, because every time you trade authenticity for acceptance, you teach yourself that your worth is conditional too. That conditional pattern begins to leak into everything. You find yourself working jobs you don't love, simply because someone once told you that's what success looks like. You stay in relationships where you're constantly compromising, because you fear that setting boundaries might make you too difficult to love. You tolerate disrespect in friendships, in families, in communities because deep down, you've been programmed to believe that pushing back will lead to disconnection. So instead of facing the temporary discomfort of honesty, you opt for the long-term disease of self-denial. And you tell yourself stories to justify it. It's not that bad. They mean well. I can handle it. But these stories are shields. They protect you from short-term rejection while exposing you to lifelong dissatisfaction. And the irony is, the more you say yes to gain approval, the less approval you actually feel. Because the approval isn't flowing toward you. It's flowing toward the version of you that you pretend to be. You may be surrounded by people who like you, but if they only like the version of you that says yes to everything, then they don't love you. They love your compliance. That realization is painful but necessary. Because until you confront it, you'll keep building relationships on weak foundations, always afraid that if you were to change, to grow, to evolve, those relationships would fall apart. And in many cases, they will. But that's not a loss, it's clarity. When you say yes out of fear, you invite manipulation. People sense it, consciously or unconsciously. They learn how to push your buttons, how to guilt, trip you, how to use flattery or pressure to bend you to their will. And the more you comply, the more they expect you to comply. You become predictable, controllable. They know you'll fold when the pressure is on. They know you're more concerned with being liked than being true, and that's how your sense of agency begins to erode. You no longer feel in control of your life. You feel like you're being pulled in every direction by the wants, needs, and expectations of others. Your calendar is full, your energy is drained, and your sense of purpose is nowhere to be found. Eventually, this leads to internal conflict. A part of you wants to break free, to be bold, to be honest, to reclaim your voice. But another part of you is terrified. Terrified of being misunderstood, terrified of being alone, terrified of not being good enough. If you stop trying so hard to please everyone, that internal tug-of-war creates anxiety, indecision, guilt. You find yourself over-apologizing, over-explaining, overthinking every interaction. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you upset someone. You take responsibility for other people's emotions, as if it's your job to keep everyone happy. But it's not your job. It never was. That belief that your worth is tied to how comfortable others feel around you is a lie handed to you by a world that rewards obedience over authenticity. And here's the harsh truth. The more you chase conditional approval, the further you drift from your destiny. Because destiny requires courage, it requires clarity, it requires the ability to say no to what doesn't serve you, even if that no disappoints someone you care about. If your dream is real, if your purpose is sacred, you cannot afford to dilute it by saying yes to every demand, every request, every opportunity that comes your way. You have to protect your energy like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. You have to build an inner foundation that says, I am enough, even if I say no. I am worthy, even if someone walks away. I am safe, even if I disappoint people. Most people never reach that point because they're addicted to being liked. But being liked is not the same as being respected. It's not the same as being known. Approval is not love. It's a performance metric. And if you base your identity on how many people approve of you, you'll spend your life performing for an audience that doesn't even know who you really are. You'll keep editing yourself to fit into rooms you don't even want to be in. You'll shrink your dreams, your values, your voice to stay acceptable. And all the while, your soul will be screaming for freedom. That scream might come out as depression, as anger, as restlessness, but it's all pointing to the same truth. You were not born to be liked. You were born to be real. So saying yes to gain conditional approval is not a shortcut to connection. It's a slow path to self-erasure. It teaches you to seek external validation for your every move. It trains your mind to depend on others to determine your worth. It makes you reactive instead of intentional. And when you live reactively, you never create, you only comply. You follow instead of lead. You drift instead of decide. And over time, your sense of power becomes something you vaguely remember, not something you actively own. Ghosting is painful. When someone suddenly disappears from your life without closure, without explanation, without warning, it can leave you feeling abandoned, confused, and emotionally destabilized. But there's something far worse than being ghosted by another person. It's when you ghost yourself. It's when you start disappearing from your own truth, when you start silencing your voice, when you make yourself invisible in order to stay convenient for others. This form of internal ghosting is more dangerous because it's gradual. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in silently, each time you override your feelings to make someone else comfortable, each time you nod in agreement while your soul screams in protest, each time you step out of alignment to fit into someone else's mold, you begin to feel distant from yourself, not because something big happened, but because of the 1,000 little moments you ignored your gut. You stop trusting your decisions, you question your worth, you doubt your desires. You don't feel excited about anything anymore, not because you've lost your passion, but because you've spent so long pretending it doesn't exist. You're still functioning, you're still working, showing up, smiling, but inside you're not present. You're not connected, you're not engaged with your own experience, you've ghosted your dreams, you've ghosted your boundaries. You've ghosted your needs, and the longer this goes on, the harder it is to find your way back. You may find yourself saying things like, "I don't know what I want anymore." That's not because your desires vanished, it's because they've been buried under layers of compromise. You've said yes to things that drained you. You've stayed in relationships that diminished you. You've tolerated conversations, environments, and situations that required you to mute who you really are. So of course you feel lost. You're not lost, you've just been ignoring the parts of you that are trying to guide you. And the longer you ignore them, the quieter they become. Your intuition doesn't stop talking, it just stops screaming. And when that voice goes quiet, you start looking outside for answers. You start relying on other people's opinions. You start comparing your journey to everyone else's highlight reel, and you forget that you once had an inner compass until you silenced it to be accepted. There's a cost to ghosting yourself. The first cost is disconnection. You start to feel like a stranger in your own life. You wake up in a body that moves, but a spirit that feels numb. You can't explain why you're sad, why you're tired, why you feel heavy all the time. But it's not a mystery. It's the grief of abandoning yourself. It's the pain of living a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. It's the result of treating your truth like an inconvenience instead of a compass. The second cost is resentment. Not just toward others, but toward yourself. You start resenting the people who ask too much of you. You resent the job you settled for. You resent the relationship you stayed in too long. You resent the choices you made that weren't truly yours. But deep down, you know the resentment is rooted in one core betrayal, the one you made against yourself. You gave parts of yourself away in exchange for approval, security, peace, or belonging, but none of it felt real. It felt like survival, and when you live in survival mode long enough, even joy becomes suspicious. Even rest feels undeserved. You don't know how to receive anymore because your identity is built on sacrifice. The third cost is exhaustion, not just physical exhaustion, but spiritual exhaustion. You're tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of feeling like you're always on. You wear different masks depending on who you're with. You become a different version of yourself in different rooms, and you don't even know who the real you is anymore. That fragmentation creates internal chaos. You can't relax when you're constantly shifting. You can't grow when you're constantly shrinking yourself to be accepted. You can't evolve when you're constantly ghosting the truth that wants to come through you. What makes this even more insidious is that on the surface, everything might look fine. You might have a good job, stable relationships, external achievements, but no external success can compensate for internal abandonment. That's why so many people feel unfulfilled even when they have it all. It's not about what they have, it's about what they've lost. And what they've lost is themselves. They traded authenticity for approval. They traded self-expression for safety. And that trade might win short-term comfort, but it guarantees long-term regret. Another layer of this internal ghosting is how it shows up in your communication. You don't speak up when you should. You censor yourself to avoid conflict. You minimize your needs. You shrink your truth. You stay silent when your voice could change the entire direction of a situation. And afterward, you replay the moment in your head, wondering what would have happened if you had just spoken up. But you didn't because your nervous system was trained to equate honesty with danger. You weren't taught to trust your voice. You were taught to silence it. That silence becomes your default. That shrinking becomes your comfort zone. And eventually, your entire life becomes a reflection of the things you were too afraid to say. But ghosting yourself also creates confusion. When you're out of alignment with your truth, life stops making sense. You set goals that don't inspire you. You chase dreams that don't belong to you. You follow paths that lead nowhere. You feel stuck. You blame your circumstances, your timing, your luck, but none of those are the real issue. The real issue is that you're living someone else's version of success. You're following a script that was handed to you by society, by your family, by your past experiences, and you forgot that you have the power to rewrite it. But to do that, you have to come back to yourself. You have to stop ghosting the parts of you that are wild, honest, raw, and real. You have to stop abandoning your desires just to keep the peace, because the peace that costs your wholeness is not peace, it's a slow spiritual death. Ghosting yourself also creates instability in your relationships. When you're not grounded in your truth, you attract people who are equally disconnected from themselves. You find yourself in connections that mirror your own confusion, people who can't meet your needs, people who don't value your voice, people who love the version of you that's easy, compliant, and non-threatening, and you wonder why the relationships don't feel safe, fulfilling, or reciprocal. But they can't be because you weren't fully present in them. You weren't fully expressed. You weren't fully you. You were a ghost, showing up physically but missing emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Every single moment of your life is shaped by the power to choose. And the most underestimated choice of all is the simple decision to say yes or no. On the surface, it seems trivial. But dig deeper, and you realize your entire reality is a direct reflection of the things you've said yes to. Your relationships, your job, your routines, your environment, they all stem from one thing, the agreements you made. And some of those agreements were made out of fear, not alignment. You said yes because you didn't want to rock the boat. You said yes because you were afraid of being judged. You said yes because you didn't believe you had a right to say no. But that yes took you down a road that wasn't yours. And you started living someone else's life without even noticing it. That one word, yes, can open doors or lock you in cages. It can bring you into rooms where your potential is honored, or trap you in situations where your soul is suffocated. And too often, people don't realize that the yes they gave out of guilt or desperation becomes the contract for a destiny that doesn't feel good. You agreed to stay in a job that drains you. You agreed to tolerate behavior that violates your boundaries. You agreed to play a role that keeps others comfortable but makes you uncomfortable. That's not destiny, it's detour. And you keep walking deeper into the wrong direction because you're afraid to change your mind. You think that once you've said yes, you're obligated to stick with it, even when everything inside of you is screaming to leave. But the truth is, a real yes should feel expansive. It should feel honest. It should be a reflection of your highest self, not your scared self, not your conditioned self, not your people-pleasing self. When your yes is rooted in clarity and truth, it unlocks something powerful. It sends a signal to your subconscious mind that you trust yourself. It affirms that you are in control of your path. It activates alignment, and alignment is the most magnetic energy you can carry. People feel it when you're in alignment. Opportunities find you faster, decisions become easier, life flows better. But that only happens when your yes is clean, when it comes from conviction, not compromise. Too many people confuse agreement with alignment. Just because you said yes doesn't mean it's right. Just because you accepted something doesn't mean it belongs to you. And the more you say yes to things that don't serve you, the more confused your life becomes. You start attracting chaos not because you're unlucky, but because your energy is out of order. You can't be clear about what you want while constantly agreeing to what you don't. That's how you end up in places that feel wrong, with people who don't understand you, doing things that exhaust you, wondering why your life feels stuck. But it's not stuck. It's just misaligned. It's out of sync with your core values, your deeper truth, your real purpose. When you start making decisions from that deeper place, when you begin to question the automatic yeses you give away so freely, your entire world shifts. Suddenly, you realize you've been overcommitting to people who would never show up for you in the same way. You realize you've been sacrificing your time, your peace, your energy for things that don't reciprocate. And when you pull your energy back, when you stop leaking your power into situations that are beneath your potential, you begin to see clearly. That clarity is uncomfortable at first. It exposes what you've tolerated. It confronts the lies you told yourself to justify staying small. But that discomfort is sacred. It's a sign you're waking up. There's a moment in every life where you realize that the cost of dishonest yeses is too high. You get tired of performing. You get tired of settling. You get tired of showing up for others while abandoning yourself. And in that moment, you start to reclaim your voice. You start to feel your own presence again. And suddenly, your yes becomes powerful, not because you say it often, but because it actually means something. It becomes rare, valuable, intentional, and the world begins to respond differently. You stop attracting tests and start attracting truth. Because your frequency rises, your boundaries sharpen, your standards elevate. You stop being available for half efforts. You stop negotiating with energy that doesn't match your vision. You stop apologizing for choosing yourself. And every yes you give from that space becomes a seed for your highest timeline. Your path begins to align with who you really are, not who you were pretending to be. The universe doesn't respond to confusion. It responds to clarity, and clarity comes from choosing what's right, not what's easy. The problem is, most people avoid clarity because it forces them to make difficult decisions. Saying no to what you've said yes to for years takes courage. Walking away from roles you've played for decades takes strength. Admitting that your past choices weren't aligned takes radical self-honesty. But the reward is freedom, the reward is peace, the reward is a life that actually fits your spirit. When you understand the weight your yes carries, you become more selective. You stop chasing every opportunity. You stop saying yes just because you're flattered, or afraid to disappoint, or trying to prove your worth. You start making decisions from wholeness, not lack. You begin to live by design, not by default. You honor your inner compass. You say yes to what excites you, challenges you, grows you, not what pacifies your fear of rejection. That shift might cost you some relationships, some status, some comfort, but what you gain is priceless. You gain yourself, you gain integrity, you gain momentum that isn't based on force, but flow, because a real yes is never forced. It's chosen. And when it's chosen from truth, it has the power to reshape your entire future. There comes a time when you realize that the reason you've been stuck, frustrated, or emotionally drained isn't because you're broken or incapable. It's because you've been living in a pattern that was never yours to begin with. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that saying yes was safer. You were trained to believe that pleasing others, keeping the peace, and avoiding conflict were signs of maturity, humility, or emotional intelligence. But what you weren't taught is that this pattern, this compulsive yes saying, is actually a trauma response, a programmed reflex born from survival, not authenticity. You weren't honoring your truth, you were avoiding your fear, and that fear dictated every decision you made, every agreement you gave, every moment you chose silence instead of honesty. Fear trains the body to shrink. It convinces the mind that rejection is dangerous and that standing up for yourself leads to abandonment. You internalize the belief that your needs are a burden. Your preferences become negotiable. Your values become adjustable. Your dreams become flexible to accommodate someone else's comfort, and before you even notice it, your life becomes a maze of silent compromises. You keep saying yes because it feels easier in the moment, but every time you do it, you move one step further from the version of you that's real, whole, and powerful. That's how emotional authority is lost, not in one big moment, but in thousands of tiny ones where you chose fear over freedom. But that can change. You can rewire this entire pattern, and it starts with awareness. It starts by recognizing that every time you override your intuition, you are reinforcing a false narrative. That it's unsafe to be honest, unsafe to say no, unsafe to disrupt the expectations placed on you. But the truth is, what's unsafe is staying in that loop. What's unsafe is continuing to build your life on foundations that can't hold your truth. What's unsafe is betraying your soul to satisfy people who wouldn't even notice if you disappeared. The first step to rewiring is giving yourself permission to disappoint people. That's the hardest part, because most of us have been conditioned to associate disappointment with failure. We fear being misunderstood, judged, or cast aside. But the reality is, not everyone is meant to understand you. Not everyone is meant to agree with your decisions. And that's okay. Your job isn't to keep everyone happy. Your job is to stay true to the voice inside you that knows when something isn't right. That voice isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you. It's trying to redirect you toward alignment. But you can't hear it when you're drowning in the noise of obligation, guilt, and fear-based agreements. The next step is breaking the reflex. That means creating space between the moment someone asks something of you and the moment you respond. You don't owe anyone an immediate answer. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to say, "Let me think about that." That pause is where your power lies. It's the space where your nervous system can recalibrate, where you can check in with your body, your intuition, your emotional state. In that space, you begin to retrain yourself to make decisions from authority, not anxiety. That's how real boundaries are born. That's how integrity is restored. That's how your life starts to shift from reactive to intentional. When you stop saying yes from fear, you make room for a new kind of yes, one that's clean, powerful, and rooted in clarity. You say yes to things that nourish you. You say yes to people who honor your energy. You say yes to work that excites your mind and expands your spirit. And those yeses become the bricks of a new identity, one where your worth is no longer tied to your compliance, but to your authenticity. That's where confidence is born, not from external praise or validation, but from the deep knowing that you trust yourself. You trust your voice, you trust your decisions, and that self-trust becomes unshakable. The rewiring also requires compassion, because you will slip up. You will say yes when you meant no. You will fall into old patterns, and when you do, shame will try to creep in. It will tell you that you failed again, that you'll never change, but shame is just another voice of the old system. Ignore it, replace it with curiosity. Ask yourself, why did I feel the need to agree? What was I afraid would happen if I didn't? How can I respond differently next time? That's how you build emotional intelligence. That's how you learn to lead yourself, not from punishment, but from understanding. Over time, as this rewiring process deepens, something beautiful happens. Your relationships evolve. The people who only liked the version of you that said yes to everything will begin to fall away, but in their place, you'll attract people who love your clarity, people who respect your boundaries, people who admire your integrity. Your relationships will become cleaner, more honest, more reciprocal. You'll no longer feel the need to prove yourself, to earn love, or to overgive. You'll show up as your full self, unapologetically. And the world will mirror that back to you in the form of deeper connections and greater opportunities. Rewiring the pattern of fear-based agreement is the doorway to emotional freedom. It requires courage. It requires a willingness to be uncomfortable, but that discomfort is the price of liberation. That's the cost of stepping out of the roles you've been assigned and stepping into the identity you were born for. And once you taste that freedom, even for a moment, there's no going back. You'll begin to protect your peace like never before. You'll guard your time, your energy, your mind. You'll stop entertaining what doesn't feed your spirit. You'll stop negotiating with versions of yourself that don't exist anymore. And slowly, the old pattern dies not because you forced it, but because it's no longer compatible with who you've become.